Welcome to Stoic Vivu, where ancient wisdom meets modern life. Our mission is simple yet profound, to help you discover how the timeless teachings of Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus can transform your daily experience in our fast-paced world. Today, we're exploring something that lies at the very heart of Stoic philosophy, the power of conscious choice. Every morning when you wake up, you face a fundamental question that will determine the quality of your entire day. What kind of person will I choose to be today? This isn't about grand gestures or life-altering decisions. The Stoics understood something revolutionary, that our character, our happiness, and our impact on the world are shaped not by dramatic moments, but by the small, seemingly ordinary choices we make hour by hour, moment by moment. Consider this. Right now, as you navigate your morning routine in Chicago, deal with traffic in Los Angeles, or rush through the subway in New York City, you're making dozens of choices. You're choosing how to respond to that frustrating email, how to interpret your coworker's comment, whether to scroll through social media or pick up that book you've been meaning to read. Each choice might seem insignificant, but the Stoics recognized that these micro-decisions are actually the building blocks of a meaningful life. The ancient Stoic philosophers weren't armchair theorists. Marcus Aurelius led the Roman Empire while facing plagues and wars. Seneca navigated the treacherous political waters of imperial Rome. Epictetus transformed from slavery to becoming one of history's most influential teachers. They understood that philosophy means nothing unless it helps you live better in the real world, facing real challenges with real constraints on your time and energy. That's why today's exploration focuses on 12 specific choices that you can make every single day. These aren't abstract concepts or feel-good platitudes. They're practical, tested approaches that have helped people for over 2,000 years navigate uncertainty, overcome obstacles, and find meaning even in difficult circumstances. Each choice we'll examine has been refined by centuries of application, from ancient Rome to modern Manhattan. What makes these choices particularly powerful is their cumulative effect. When you begin choosing immediate action over procrastination, when you start building systems instead of relying on motivation alone, when you learn to see difficult people as opportunities for growth rather than obstacles to your happiness, something remarkable happens. These individual practices begin to reinforce each other, creating a foundation of resilience and wisdom that can weather any storm. The beauty of the Stoic approach is its accessibility. You don't need special equipment, expensive courses, or perfect conditions to begin. Whether you're a busy parent juggling work and family, a college student facing uncertainty about the future, or a professional dealing with workplace stress, these 12 daily choices can be implemented immediately, right where you are, with whatever resources you currently possess. As we journey through each choice together, you'll discover how ancient wisdom can thoroughly address modern problems. You'll learn why a Roman emperor's insights about handling criticism remain perfectly relevant in our age of social media, and how a former slave's teachings about emotional control can help you navigate today's information overload. Most importantly, you'll gain practical tools that you can use starting today to build the life you actually want to live. 1. Choose action over endless preparation. You're sitting at your kitchen table in Denver at 6:30 a.m., your laptop open to that business plan you've been perfecting for 8 months. The coffee grows cold as you scroll through market research for the third time this week, telling yourself you need just a little more data before you can move forward. Your notebook fills with increasingly detailed strategies, contingency plans, and backup contingency plans. Meanwhile, your neighbor down the hall launched her food truck with a simple menu and a borrowed van, and she's already serving her second neighborhood. This scenario plays out countless times across America every day. We convince ourselves that more preparation equals better results, but the ancient Stoics understood a profound truth that modern productivity culture often misses entirely. The Roman philosopher Seneca, who managed vast business enterprises while serving as advisor to emperors, observed that every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end, but only if we actually begin. Seneca wrote extensively about what he called the disease of endless preparation. In his letters to Lucilius, he noted, "It is likely that some troubles will befall us, but it is not a present fact. How often has the unexpected happened? How often has the expected never come to pass? Even if it is ordained to be, what is the point of deliberately anticipating your suffering?" He understood that perfectionist planning often masks a deeper fear of taking real action in an uncertain world. The Stoic approach to action isn't reckless or impulsive. Instead, it recognizes that preparation has a point of diminishing returns, and that real learning happens through engagement with reality, not endless theorizing about reality. When you take action with the information you currently possess, you gather feedback that no amount of planning could have provided. You discover which assumptions were correct and which were completely wrong. Most importantly, you build the practical wisdom that comes only from real experience. Consider how this principle applies to your daily life. That difficult conversation with your boss that you've been rehearsing for weeks? The Stoics would suggest that your mental preparation has probably reached its useful limit. Additional rehearsal won't reveal what you truly need to know, which is how your boss will actually respond. That home improvement project you've been researching online for months? At some point, watching more YouTube tutorials becomes a substitute for actually picking up the tools and learning through doing. Marcus Aurelius, writing in his personal journal that became the Meditations, captured this perfectly when he noted, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He understood that we cannot control outcomes, but we can control our willingness to engage with uncertainty. When we endlessly prepare, we're often trying to control outcomes that are fundamentally beyond our control. The practical application of this Stoic principle begins with recognizing the difference between productive preparation and avoidance behavior. Productive preparation has clear endpoints and measurable deliverables. You research 3 competitive options, you create a basic budget, and you identify the key risks. Avoidance behavior, disguised as preparation, has no natural stopping point. You find yourself researching the research, planning your planning, and preparing to prepare. Start implementing this choice by setting preparation deadlines for yourself. When you catch yourself saying, "I just need to research one more thing," ask yourself what Marcus Aurelius would ask. What additional preparation would actually change my fundamental approach? If the answer is nothing significant, then you've reached the point where action becomes more valuable than additional planning. The Stoics also understood that imperfect action often teaches us more than perfect planning. When you launch that imperfect website, start that flawed exercise routine, or have that uncomfortable conversation with less than ideal preparation, you gain something irreplaceable, real-world feedback. You discover what actually works versus what sounds good in theory. You build confidence through competence rather than through theoretical knowledge. This doesn't mean abandoning planning entirely. The Stoics were practical people who understood the value of reasonable preparation. Seneca himself was an incredibly successful businessman who certainly planned his ventures. The key insight is recognizing when planning becomes a comfortable substitute for action and having the courage to step forward into uncertainty when you have enough information to begin, even if you don't have perfect information to guarantee success. In essence, the Stoics taught that life rewards participation more than preparation. The person who acts with 80% of the information they wish they had will almost always outperform the person who endlessly seeks 100% certainty before beginning. 2. Build systems that work when motivation fails. You're dragging yourself out of bed in Seattle on a gray Tuesday morning, feeling absolutely zero motivation to exercise. Yesterday, you felt energized and committed to your fitness goals, but today the couch looks infinitely more appealing than your running shoes. This is the moment when most people either force themselves through sheer willpower or give up entirely. But there's a third option that the ancient Stoics discovered, one that doesn't depend on how you feel in any given moment. The great Stoic philosopher Seneca understood something that modern productivity experts are only now rediscovering. He wrote, "Life without design is erratic." What he meant was that when we rely on willpower and motivation alone, we become slaves to our fluctuating emotional states. One day, we're inspired and unstoppable. The next day, we can barely function. But when we build systems and routines that operate independently of our feelings, we create a framework that carries us forward regardless of our momentary enthusiasm. Think about how this plays out in your daily experience. When you have a systematic morning routine, you don't wake up and debate whether you feel like brushing your teeth. You simply brush them because that's what the routine dictates. The decision has already been made, and the system takes over. Seneca applied this same principle to every aspect of life that mattered to him. He had systems for physical exercise, for intellectual study, for business decisions, and for moral reflection. The key insight here is that motivation is fundamentally unreliable. It's wonderful when it shows up, but building your important goals around motivation is like building your house on shifting sand. Systems, on the other hand, are like bedrock. They provide stability when everything else feels chaotic. Marcus Aurelius demonstrated this perfectly in his own life. Even while managing the vast Roman Empire and dealing with plagues, wars, and political crises, he maintained his system of morning reflection and evening review that we can read about in his meditations. Consider how you can apply this principle to the areas of your life where you most often struggle with consistency. If you want to read more, don't rely on feeling motivated to read. Instead, create a system where you read for 15 minutes immediately after your morning coffee, before you check your phone or open your laptop. If you want to improve your relationships, don't wait until you feel like reaching out to friends. Build a system where you contact one person from your social circle every Sunday evening. The beauty of systems is that they compound over time in ways that motivation-driven efforts rarely do. When you rely on motivation, you have good days and bad days, and the bad days often cancel out the progress from the good days. But when you have a system, you make small, consistent progress even on the days when you don't feel like participating. Over months and years, this consistent progress creates results that would be impossible to achieve through sporadic bursts of motivated effort. Epictetus, who understood the power of habits from his experience as both a slave and a teacher, emphasized that we become what we repeatedly do. He taught that excellence is not an act but a habit. This means that the person you become is determined more by your systems and routines than by your occasional inspired moments. The daily choices you make when nobody is watching and when you don't feel particularly motivated are what ultimately shape your character and your outcomes. Building effective systems requires understanding your own patterns and limitations. The most successful systems are those that make the desired behavior easier and the undesired behavior harder. If you want to eat healthier, design your kitchen environment so that healthy foods are easily accessible and unhealthy foods require more effort to obtain. If you want to write more, set up your workspace so that opening your writing document is the first thing you see when you sit down at your computer. The Stoic approach to systems also includes preparing for obstacles and setbacks. Seneca practiced what he called negative visualization, where he would imagine potential disruptions to his routines and develop strategies for maintaining his important practices even under difficult circumstances. This isn't pessimism, it's practical wisdom. When you know that travel, illness, or unexpected responsibilities will occasionally disrupt your normal routine, you can create simplified versions of your systems that can adapt to these circumstances. Ultimately, the Stoics understood that freedom comes not from following your impulses, but from following your principles. And systems are what make it possible to live according to your principles even when your impulses are pulling you in other directions. 3. Feed your mind ancient wisdom, not modern noise. You're scrolling through your phone in a coffee shop in Austin, jumping from a breaking news alert to a social media argument to a trending video about someone you've never heard of. Within 10 minutes, you've consumed dozens of fragments of information, none of which will matter tomorrow, yet your mind feels simultaneously overstimulated and undernourished. Meanwhile, the book in your backpack, a collection of letters from a Roman philosopher written 2,000 years ago, remains unopened. This daily choice between ancient wisdom and modern noise will determine not just what you know, but who you become. Epictetus taught his students a principle that seems almost impossible to follow in our current age. If you wish to improve, be content to appear clueless or stupid in extraneous matters. What he understood, and what we desperately need to rediscover, is that the human mind has limited capacity for deep processing. When we fill that capacity with the endless stream of current events, celebrity gossip, and manufactured controversies, we leave no room for the kind of profound thinking that actually transforms our lives. The ancient Stoics made a crucial distinction between information and wisdom. Information tells you what happened yesterday or what might happen tomorrow. Wisdom teaches you how to live well regardless of what happens. When you spend your morning reading Marcus Aurelius' reflections on dealing with difficult people, you're acquiring tools that will serve you for decades. When you spend that same morning reading about the latest political scandal, you're consuming something that will be irrelevant within weeks but will leave you more anxious and distracted than before. Consider the difference in how these two types of mental input affect your daily experience. After reading about Seneca's approach to managing wealth and relationships, you find yourself making better decisions about your own finances and treating your family with more patience. After scrolling through social media for 30 minutes, you feel vaguely agitated, comparing your life to others, and less capable of focusing on meaningful work. The contrast is stark once you start paying attention to it. This doesn't mean becoming completely disconnected from current events or ignoring your civic responsibilities. The Stoics were deeply engaged in the politics and social issues of their time. Marcus Aurelius led an empire, Seneca advised emperors, and Epictetus trained future leaders. but they understood the difference between informed engagement and mindless consumption. They sought information that would help them act wisely and justly, not information that would simply occupy their attention. The practical challenge is developing what we might call information discernment. This begins with asking yourself a simple question before consuming any piece of media. Will engaging with this make me wiser, more capable, or better able to serve others? If the answer is no, then you're choosing entertainment over education, and there's nothing wrong with entertainment in its proper place. But when entertainment begins to crowd out wisdom, you're making a choice that will diminish your capacity for deep thought and meaningful action. Ancient texts offer something that modern media cannot provide: a perspective that has been tested across centuries. When Seneca writes about dealing with setbacks, he's not offering untested theories or trending opinions. He's sharing insights that helped him navigate political exile, financial ruin, and ultimately his own execution. When Marcus Aurelius reflects on leadership challenges, he's processing real experiences of managing plague, war, and betrayal at the highest levels of power. This wisdom has a proven track record that no contemporary blog post or news article can match. The transformation that happens when you prioritize ancient wisdom over modern noise is profound but gradual. You begin to notice that the daily dramas that once captured your attention seem less important. Problems that once felt overwhelming start to feel manageable because you've read how people faced similar challenges throughout history. Your conversations become deeper because you're filling your mind with substantial ideas rather than trivial information. Most importantly, you develop what the Stoics called practical wisdom, the ability to see clearly and act appropriately regardless of external circumstances. Building this habit requires intentional choices about how you start and end each day. Instead of checking the news or social media first thing in the morning, spend those precious moments when your mind is freshest engaging with texts that have nourished human souls for centuries. Replace the habit of scrolling before bed with reading something that will give your subconscious mind valuable material to process during sleep. These small changes in your information diet will compound over time, creating a foundation of wisdom that no amount of breaking news can shake. 4. Focus only on what truly matters. You're sitting at your desk in Manhattan at 3 p.m., surrounded by 17 browser tabs, 3 half-finished projects, 2 urgent emails that aren't actually urgent, and 1 genuinely important task that you've been avoiding all day. Your phone buzzes with notifications from apps you don't remember downloading. Your calendar shows back-to-back meetings that accomplish little but consume everything. You feel busy, overwhelmed, and paradoxically unproductive. This is the modern condition that Marcus Aurelius anticipated 2,000 years ago when he developed one of the most powerful questions in all of philosophy. Marcus Aurelius, while managing the vast complexity of the Roman Empire, wrote in his personal journal what has become one of the most practical pieces of advice ever recorded. Ask yourself at every moment, is this essential? Because most of what we say and do is not essential. If you can eliminate it, you'll have more time and more tranquility. Every unnecessary action is a barrier to finding your true path. Understanding what Marcus Aurelius meant by essential requires grasping the Stoic concept of what they called preferred indifference. These are things that might be pleasant or useful but aren't necessary for a meaningful life. A bigger apartment might be nice, but it's not essential for happiness or virtue. A promotion might be satisfying, but it's not essential for living according to your principles. Social media engagement might be entertaining, but it's not essential for deep relationships or personal growth. The power of this question lies not just in what it eliminates, but in what it preserves and amplifies. When you consistently ask, "Is this essential?" you begin to notice patterns in your choices. You discover that you spend enormous amounts of time and energy on activities that add little value to your life or the lives of others. More importantly, you realize that this scattered attention is preventing you from doing excellent work on the things that actually matter. Consider how this principle transforms your approach to daily decisions. That meeting request that doesn't advance any important project becomes an easy no when you ask if it's essential. That social obligation that leaves you drained rather than energized becomes something you can politely decline. That news article about a celebrity controversy becomes something you can scroll past without feeling like you're missing something important. Each small choice to focus on the essential creates space for what truly deserves your attention. The Stoics understood that human attention and energy are finite resources that must be allocated wisely. Marcus Aurelius wasn't advocating for a minimalist lifestyle for its own sake. He was recognizing a fundamental truth about human psychology. We cannot do everything well, so we must choose what deserves our best effort. When we try to be excellent at everything, we end up being mediocre at most things and excellent at nothing. Applying this principle requires developing what we might call essential thinking. This means regularly examining your commitments, activities, and goals to determine which ones align with your deepest values and which ones you've accumulated out of habit, social pressure, or unclear thinking. Essential thinking asks not just, "Can I do this?" but, "Should I do this?" and, "What am I not doing because I'm doing this instead?" The process of elimination that Marcus Aurelius describes isn't about becoming a hermit or avoiding all social responsibilities. The Roman emperor certainly didn't withdraw from public life. Instead, it's about becoming intentional rather than reactive in how you spend your irreplaceable time and energy. When you eliminate the non-essential, you create space to pursue the essential with the focus and dedication it deserves. One of the most powerful aspects of this approach is how it transforms your relationship with opportunity. In our culture, we're often told that saying no to opportunities means missing out on something valuable. But Marcus Aurelius understood that every yes to something non-essential is an automatic no to something that might be truly important. When you turn down that networking event that doesn't align with your goals, you're saying yes to spending meaningful time with your family. The practice of asking, "Is this essential?" also develops what the Stoics called practical wisdom, the ability to discern between what appears important and what actually is important. Many things in our daily lives have the appearance of urgency or significance without actually being either. The skill of seeing through these false priorities becomes stronger with practice, like developing any other muscle. This practice reveals something profound about the nature of satisfaction and accomplishment. When you spread your efforts across dozens of activities, even completing tasks feels hollow because you know you're not giving anything your full attention. But when you focus deeply on a few essential areas, the satisfaction of meaningful progress becomes one of life's great rewards. Ultimately, Marcus Aurelius discovered that the path to both productivity and peace lies not in doing more things, but in doing fewer things with greater intention and excellence. 5. Turn every difficult person into your teacher. You're walking into your office building in Chicago when you encounter that coworker who always seems to drain your energy. They're already complaining about the elevator being slow, criticizing the new policy changes, and making snide comments about other team members before you've even reached the third floor. Your initial reaction is to avoid them, to put in earbuds and hope they don't notice you. But what if this person, as frustrating as they are, could actually become one of your most valuable teachers? Marcus Aurelius faced this exact challenge on a much larger scale. As Roman emperor, he dealt with corrupt senators, incompetent generals, rebellious provinces, and scheming courtiers on a daily basis. Rather than seeing these difficult people as obstacles to his happiness or effectiveness, he developed a revolutionary perspective that transformed every interpersonal challenge into an opportunity for growth. In his meditations, he wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." But he took this insight even further, recognizing that difficult people serve as unwitting instructors in the very virtues we most need to develop. The Stoic approach to difficult people begins with understanding what Marcus Aurelius called the view from above. When someone is rude, manipulative, or incompetent, our natural reaction is to focus on how their behavior affects us. We feel frustrated, angry, or victimized. But the Stoics train themselves to step back and ask a different question. What virtue is this situation asking me to practice? Suddenly, that chronically negative coworker becomes your patience trainer. That micromanaging boss becomes your instructor in emotional self-regulation. That argumentative family member becomes your teacher in the art of responding rather than reacting. This shift in perspective requires understanding the Stoic concept of what they called impressions. An impression is your initial interpretation of any event or interaction. When someone cuts you off in traffic, your first impression might be, "That person is a selfish jerk who doesn't respect other drivers." But impressions are not facts. They're interpretations, and the Stoics understood that we have the power to examine and revise our impressions before they determine our emotional responses. Consider how this plays out in practical terms. When your difficult coworker starts their daily complaint session, instead of automatically feeling annoyed, you can pause and reframe the situation. This person is actually providing you with an opportunity to practice active listening without judgment. They're giving you a chance to work on maintaining your inner peace regardless of external circumstances. They're helping you develop the skill of responding with kindness even when kindness isn't reciprocated. These are advanced emotional and social skills that you might never develop if you only interacted with easy, agreeable people. The genius of this approach is that it transforms you from a victim of other people's behavior into an active participant in your own character development. Instead of hoping that difficult people will change or disappear from your life, you begin to see them as essential components of your growth process. This doesn't mean becoming a doormat or accepting truly harmful behavior. The Stoics were clear about maintaining appropriate boundaries and standing up for justice when necessary. But it does mean recognizing that every interpersonal challenge contains valuable lessons about patience, courage, wisdom, and justice. Marcus Aurelius also understood that difficult people often reflect back to us qualities we don't like about ourselves. The person who constantly interrupts others might be showing you your own tendency to dominate conversations. The colleague who takes credit for others' work might be revealing your own occasional lack of generosity in acknowledging contributions. When you start looking for these mirrors, difficult people become invaluable sources of self-knowledge. The practical application of this principle begins with a simple mental exercise that you can practice immediately. The next time someone behaves in a way that triggers frustration or anger, pause and ask yourself 3 questions. What virtue is this situation asking me to practice? What can this person teach me about myself? And how can I respond in a way that makes me a better person? These questions don't eliminate the challenge of dealing with difficult people, but they transform these interactions from energy-draining obstacles into energy-generating opportunities for growth. Therefore, the Stoics discovered that our greatest teachers often come disguised as our most challenging relationships. 6. Stop caring what strangers think about you. You're posting a photo on social media from your vacation in San Francisco when you notice someone left a harsh comment on your previous post. A complete stranger, someone whose profile shows they live across the country and have no connection to your life, has decided to share their negative opinion about your career choice. Within minutes, their words have completely shifted your mood. You find yourself crafting responses, checking their profile for ammunition, and feeling genuinely hurt by someone who knows absolutely nothing about your actual circumstances, values, or character. Marcus Aurelius encountered this same phenomenon, though his critics were senators and citizens of Rome rather than anonymous internet commenters. As emperor, he faced constant public scrutiny and harsh judgment from people who had never met him personally. His response to this challenge produced one of the most liberating insights in all of philosophy. He wrote in his Meditations, "We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." This observation reveals a fundamental contradiction in human psychology that the Stoics learned to resolve through practical wisdom. The first step in understanding this Stoic principle requires recognizing the illogical nature of caring about strangers' opinions. Marcus Aurelius developed a simple but powerful exercise for this. When someone criticized him publicly, he would ask himself a series of questions about the critic. Do I know this person's character? Would I trust their judgment about any other important matter in my life? Do they understand my circumstances, my challenges, or my responsibilities? Have they demonstrated wisdom and virtue in their own choices? Consider how this mental exercise transforms your relationship with criticism. That stranger commenting negatively on your social media post, do they know about your financial responsibilities, your family situation, your health challenges, or your long-term goals? Would you ask them for advice about major life decisions? If you wouldn't trust their guidance about important matters, why would you allow their opinion about you to affect your emotional state? The deeper insight here is understanding the difference between judgment from people who know you well and judgment from people who know you not at all. When your spouse, close friend, or mentor offers criticism, they're speaking from a place of knowledge and presumably care. They understand your patterns, your values, and your circumstances. Their feedback, even when difficult to hear, comes from a foundation of real information about who you are and what you're trying to accomplish. Strangers, by contrast, are judging you based on fragments of information, projections of their own issues, or simple misunderstanding. Marcus Aurelius recognized that strangers' opinions often say more about the person offering the opinion than about the person being judged. The person who criticizes your career choice may be unhappy with their own professional situation. The person who mocks your appearance may be struggling with their own self-image. Understanding this dynamic helps you see criticism from strangers as information about them rather than an accurate assessment of you. The Stoics also understood that seeking approval from strangers is a recipe for anxiety and inconsistency. Public opinion is fickle, contradictory, and often based on incomplete information. The same action that one group of strangers applauds, another group will condemn. If you try to please everyone, you end up pleasing no one, including yourself. More importantly, you lose touch with your own values and judgment, which are the only reliable guides for living according to your principles. This doesn't mean becoming arrogant or dismissive of all feedback. The Stoics valued wisdom and were always willing to learn from others when that learning was genuinely valuable. But they distinguished between feedback that comes from knowledge and feedback that comes from ignorance. They listened carefully to people who knew them well and had demonstrated good judgment, while politely ignoring the noise from people who lacked both knowledge of their situation and wisdom about life in general. The practical application of this principle begins with developing what we might call source discrimination. Before allowing anyone's opinion to influence your emotions or decisions, ask yourself whether this person has the knowledge and wisdom necessary to offer valuable guidance. This simple filter eliminates the vast majority of criticism that causes unnecessary suffering while preserving your openness to genuinely helpful feedback. Ultimately, Marcus Aurelius discovered that freedom from others' opinions is freedom to live according to your own carefully considered values and principles. 7. Keep your inner peace when the world goes crazy. You're sitting in your living room in Phoenix, watching the news unfold on your television screen. Breaking news alerts flash across your phone every few minutes. Social media feeds overflow with outrage, fear, and conflicting information. Your neighbors are arguing loudly in the hallway about politics. Your family group chat has devolved into heated debates about current events. Everyone around you seems swept up in emotional chaos, and you can feel that familiar anxiety creeping into your chest, threatening to pull you into the same turbulent state that has consumed so many others. Marcus Aurelius faced this exact challenge during some of the most tumultuous periods in Roman history. Plagues swept through the empire, barbarian tribes pressed against the borders, political conspiracies threatened his rule, and social unrest erupted in major cities. Yet in his personal writings, we find a man who maintained remarkable clarity and composure amid external chaos. His secret was understanding a fundamental principle that the Stoics called the discipline of perception. The discipline of perception begins with recognizing that events themselves are neutral. What creates our emotional disturbance is not what happens in the world, but how we interpret and respond to what happens. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This insight becomes your anchor when everything around you feels unstable and unpredictable. Consider how this principle applies to the overwhelming nature of modern information. When you watch news coverage of distant events, your nervous system responds as if these events were happening directly to you. Your body produces stress hormones, your mind races with worst-case scenarios, and your emotional state becomes tied to circumstances that are completely beyond your control. The Stoics understood that this reaction, while natural, is neither helpful nor necessary. The key to maintaining inner peace during external chaos lies in what Epictetus called the dichotomy of control. This fundamental Stoic teaching asks you to clearly distinguish between what is within your influence and what lies beyond it. The political situation in Washington is beyond your control. The economic conditions globally are beyond your control. The behavior of other people in your community is largely beyond your control. However, your response to these circumstances, your daily choices, your treatment of the people directly in your life, and your commitment to your own principles remain completely within your control. This doesn't mean becoming apathetic or disengaged from important issues. Marcus Aurelius remained deeply involved in governing the empire and addressing its challenges. But he understood the difference between concerned engagement and anxious attachment. Concerned engagement means staying informed enough to make wise decisions and taking appropriate action within your sphere of influence. Anxious attachment means allowing your emotional well-being to fluctuate based on events you cannot control. The practical application of this principle requires developing what we might call emotional boundaries. Just as you might wear a raincoat to stay dry in a storm, you need psychological protection to maintain your inner stability when surrounded by external turbulence. This protection comes from regularly returning your attention to what the Stoics called your inner citadel, that core part of yourself that remains unchanged regardless of external circumstances. Building this inner citadel requires daily practice and conscious cultivation. Each morning, before exposing yourself to news or social media, spend several minutes reflecting on your fundamental values and commitments. Ask yourself what kind of person you want to be today, regardless of what happens in the world around you. This mental preparation creates a stable foundation that external events cannot shake. Think of it as donning invisible armor that protects your inner peace from the arrows of external chaos. Marcus Aurelius also practiced what he called the view from above, imagining himself observing current events from a cosmic perspective. From this vantage point, today's crises appear as small moments in the vast sweep of human history. This perspective doesn't minimize genuine suffering or important issues, but it helps you maintain the emotional equilibrium necessary for wise action rather than reactive panic. When you zoom out far enough, you begin to see patterns that repeat throughout history, and this recognition brings both humility and peace. Another powerful Stoic technique for maintaining inner peace involves what they called negative visualization. This practice involves briefly imagining how much worse current circumstances could be, which naturally generates gratitude for what remains stable and good in your life. When the world feels chaotic, remembering that you still have your health, your relationships, your capacity for choice, and your ability to act according to your values helps restore perspective and calm. The Stoics also understood the importance of controlling your information diet during turbulent times. Just as you wouldn't eat spoiled food, you shouldn't consume toxic information that serves no constructive purpose. This means being selective about news sources, limiting exposure to social media outrage, and choosing to spend time with people who discuss problems constructively rather than those who amplify anxiety and fear. Ultimately, the Stoics discovered that true security comes not from controlling external circumstances, but from cultivating unshakable inner resources that remain constant regardless of what the world throws at you. 8. Walk your way to mental clarity. You're staring at your computer screen in Boston at 2 p.m., feeling completely stuck on a problem that seemed manageable this morning. Your mind feels foggy, your creativity has disappeared, and every solution you consider seems inadequate. You've been sitting in the same position for 3 hours, drinking coffee and hoping inspiration will strike. Meanwhile, just outside your window, the tree-lined streets of your neighborhood are calling, offering a simple solution that the ancient Stoics discovered thousands of years ago: the transformative power of putting one foot in front of the other. Seneca, the Roman philosopher who managed vast business enterprises while serving as advisor to emperors, understood something about the human mind that modern neuroscience is only beginning to confirm. He wrote, "We should take wandering outdoor walks, so that the mind might be nourished and refreshed by the open air and deep breathing." What Seneca recognized was that walking isn't just physical exercise. It's a form of moving meditation that unlocks mental capabilities that remain dormant when we're sedentary. The connection between walking and mental clarity operates on multiple levels that the Stoics intuitively grasped. When you walk, especially outdoors, your brain shifts into what researchers now call the default mode network, a state of neural activity that promotes creative problem solving, memory consolidation, and emotional processing. Your conscious mind relaxes its grip on immediate concerns, allowing your subconscious to work on problems in ways that sitting and thinking harder simply cannot achieve. Consider how this principle transforms your approach to mental challenges throughout your daily life. That work problem that seemed impossible while you were hunched over your desk often reveals obvious solutions during a 20-minute walk around the block. The relationship conflict that felt overwhelming in your apartment becomes manageable when you process it while walking through a park. The life decision that created anxiety when you were lying in bed at night gains clarity when you walk it through during a morning stroll. These aren't mere coincidences, but entirely predictable results of how walking affects your mental processes. The Stoics also understood that walking serves as a natural regulator of emotional states, something particularly valuable in our high-stress modern world. When you're feeling anxious, angry, or depressed, walking literally changes your physiology in ways that promote emotional balance. Your breathing deepens naturally, your heart rate increases beneficially, and your body produces endorphins that naturally improve mood. Marcus Aurelius often wrote about taking walks to clear his mind before making important decisions or dealing with difficult people, understanding that movement prepared his mind for wise action. Walking also provides what the Stoics called present moment awareness, a state of consciousness that they considered essential for wisdom and peace. When you're focused on the rhythm of your steps, the sensation of air moving in and out of your lungs, and the sights and sounds around you, your mind naturally lets go of anxious thoughts about the future and regretful thoughts about the past. This return to the present moment is where wisdom and clarity naturally emerge, free from the mental noise that clouds judgment. The practical application of this principle requires understanding that walking for mental clarity is fundamentally different from walking for physical exercise. While both are valuable, walking for mental clarity is typically slower, more meditative, and focused on internal processing rather than external goals like speed or distance. You're not trying to achieve a certain pace or burn specific calories. You're creating space for your mind to work in ways that sitting still cannot facilitate. This type of walking is more about mental space than physical space. The ancient Stoics practiced what they called ambulatory philosophy, where teachers and students would walk together while discussing important ideas and working through complex philosophical problems. They discovered that physical movement facilitates mental movement, that walking literally helps thoughts flow more freely and connections form more naturally. This is why many of your best insights occur not while you're trying to force solutions at your desk, but while you're walking without any specific agenda, allowing your mind to wander and make unexpected connections. The beauty of walking as a mental clarity practice lies in its universal accessibility and immediate availability to everyone. You don't need special equipment, perfect weather, or ideal conditions to benefit from this ancient wisdom. Whether you're walking busy city streets, quiet suburban sidewalks, or peaceful rural trails, the mental benefits remain remarkably consistent. Even a brief walk around your office building or apartment complex can dramatically shift your mental state, breaking through mental fog and restoring clarity. Therefore, the Stoics discovered that the simple act of walking provides one of the most reliable and thoroughly accessible methods for accessing the deep mental clarity and emotional balance that modern life constantly threatens to disrupt. 9. Practice kindness as your daily justice. You're standing in line at a busy grocery store in Atlanta during rush hour, watching the cashier struggle with a difficult customer ahead of you. The customer is berating the young employee over a coupon that won't scan, raising their voice and making personal attacks about competence and intelligence. You can see the cashier's hands trembling slightly, their eyes beginning to water. Other customers are shifting uncomfortably, some checking their phones to avoid the awkwardness, others shaking their heads in disapproval. In this moment, you have a choice that the ancient Stoics would recognize as one of the most important decisions you can make in daily life. How will you respond to an opportunity for kindness? Seneca, the Roman philosopher who witnessed both the heights of imperial power and the depths of human cruelty, understood something profound about the relationship between personal virtue and social justice. He wrote, "Every human being you meet is an opportunity for kindness." This wasn't mere sentiment or philosophical idealism. Seneca recognized that kindness serves as the foundation upon which all other forms of justice are built. When we fail to treat individual human beings with basic dignity and compassion, we create the conditions that make larger injustices possible. The Stoic understanding of kindness differs significantly from how we often think about it in modern culture. We tend to view kindness as something nice we do when we feel good, when we have extra emotional energy, or when someone deserves our consideration. But the Stoics saw kindness as a discipline, a practice of justice that we owe to every human being regardless of our mood, their behavior, or the circumstances we find ourselves in. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "Whenever you want to cheer yourself, consider the good qualities of your companions." He understood that choosing to see the humanity in others, especially difficult others, is a practice that transforms both the giver and receiver of kindness. Consider how this principle transforms your daily interactions with the world around you. When you choose to speak patiently to the overwhelmed customer service representative, you're not just being nice, you're practicing justice. You're acknowledging that this person deserves to be treated with dignity regardless of their ability to solve your problem quickly. When you hold the door for someone carrying heavy packages, you're recognizing their struggle and choosing to ease their burden. These small acts might seem insignificant, but they represent the daily practice of seeing others as fully human and worthy of consideration. The genius of the Stoic approach to kindness lies in understanding that it serves multiple purposes simultaneously. When you practice kindness toward others, you're simultaneously developing your own character, improving the immediate social environment around you, and contributing to the broader culture of how human beings treat one another. Epictetus taught that we become what we repeatedly do, and when we repeatedly choose kindness, we become kinder people. This isn't just about feeling good about ourselves. It's about developing the moral strength necessary to stand up for justice when larger challenges arise. Kindness also serves as what we might call a virtue laboratory, where we can develop other important character traits. When you choose to be patient with someone who is frustrating you, you're developing self-control. When you go out of your way to help someone who cannot help you in return, You're practicing courage by acting according to your principles rather than your immediate self-interest. When you treat someone kindly despite their rude behavior toward you, you're developing wisdom by recognizing that their actions reflect their internal state rather than your worth as a person. The practical application of this principle requires understanding that kindness is not the same as being a pushover or avoiding necessary boundaries. The Stoics were clear that justice sometimes requires firm action, honest feedback, or refusing to enable harmful behavior. But even when we must be firm, we can choose to be kind. We can disagree with someone's actions while still treating them as a human being worthy of respect. We can enforce appropriate boundaries while maintaining compassion for the person whose behavior made those boundaries necessary. Building a daily practice of kindness begins with what Marcus Aurelius called morning reflection. Before you encounter other people each day, spend a few moments reminding yourself that everyone you meet is fighting battles you know nothing about, carrying burdens you cannot see, and deserving of the same consideration you hope to receive from others. This mental preparation creates a foundation of compassion that can withstand the inevitable frustrations and challenges of human interaction. Ultimately, the Stoics discovered that practicing kindness as daily justice creates a powerful cycle of positive change that extends far beyond any individual interaction, building the character necessary for larger acts of courage and justice while making the world more hospitable for everyone who shares it with us. 10. Read deeply to master your life. You're browsing through a bookstore in Portland on a Saturday afternoon, overwhelmed by the endless shelves of self-help books promising quick fixes, productivity hacks, and life transformation in 30 days or less. Meanwhile, tucked away in the philosophy section, sits a worn copy of Seneca's letters, containing wisdom that has guided human decision-making for 2,000 years. Most people walk past these ancient texts, assuming they're outdated or irrelevant to modern life. But the Stoics understood something about learning that our instant gratification culture has forgotten. True mastery of life comes not from consuming more information, but from deeply understanding timeless principles that have been tested across centuries of human experience. Seneca, who managed vast business enterprises while serving as one of Rome's most influential advisors, wrote extensively about the relationship between reading and practical wisdom. He observed, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more who is poor." This principle applies directly to how we approach learning and knowledge acquisition. In our age of information abundance, we often suffer from what we might call intellectual poverty, not because we lack access to information, but because we constantly crave the next piece of content rather than deeply digesting what we already have. The Stoic approach to reading and learning emphasizes depth over breadth, understanding over information accumulation. When Seneca recommended books to his student Lucilius, he didn't suggest reading widely across many topics. Instead, he advocated for what he called profitable reading, engaging deeply with texts that could genuinely transform how you think and act. He wrote, "You should extend your stay among writers whose genius is unquestionable, deriving constant nourishment from them if you wish to gain anything from your reading that will find a lasting place in your mind." Consider how this principle applies to your current learning habits. If you're like most people, you probably consume dozens of articles, blog posts, and social media updates each week, yet struggle to remember or apply much of what you've read just days later. This happens because shallow reading creates what psychologists call the illusion of knowledge. You feel informed because you've been exposed to many ideas, but you haven't developed the deep understanding necessary to apply those ideas effectively in real situations. The contrast becomes clear when you think about how deeply you understand the few books that have genuinely influenced your life. These are typically books you've read multiple times, discussed with others, and actively applied to your daily decisions. The depth of engagement creates lasting transformation in ways that consuming hundreds of superficial pieces of content never could. Marcus Aurelius demonstrated this principle in his own learning approach. Rather than reading widely across many philosophical schools, he focused intensively on Stoic principles, returning to the same fundamental concepts repeatedly until they became integrated into his character and decision-making processes. Deep reading requires developing what we might call intellectual patience, the willingness to spend significant time with difficult ideas rather than jumping to the next piece of content when understanding doesn't come immediately. This patience becomes a form of discipline that strengthens your capacity for sustained attention and complex thinking. When you work through challenging passages in ancient texts, when you reread sections multiple times to grasp their full meaning, when you pause to consider how philosophical principles apply to your specific circumstances, you're developing mental muscles that serve you far beyond the reading experience itself. The practical application of this principle begins with being highly selective about what deserves your deep attention. Rather than trying to read everything that seems interesting or relevant, choose a small number of books that address fundamental questions about how to live well, how to make good decisions, and how to develop character. Spend months or even years with these texts, reading them multiple times, taking notes, discussing them with others, and most importantly, experimenting with applying their insights to your daily life. Seneca recommended what he called reading with a pen, actively engaging with texts by writing down key insights, questioning the author's assumptions, and connecting new ideas to your existing knowledge and experience. This transforms reading from a passive consumption activity into an active dialogue with some of history's greatest thinkers. When you read Marcus Aurelius' reflections on dealing with difficult people, you're not just learning about ancient Roman challenges. You're participating in a conversation about timeless human problems that continue to affect your life today. The Stoics also understood that deep reading serves as preparation for life's inevitable challenges. When you've thoroughly absorbed Epictetus' teachings about the dichotomy of control, when you've internalized Seneca's insights about dealing with setbacks, when you've contemplated Marcus Aurelius' reflections on mortality and meaning, you develop what we might call philosophical reserves that you can draw upon when facing difficult circumstances. These reserves provide stability and wisdom that no amount of shallow content consumption could ever create. Ultimately, the Stoics discovered that mastering life requires mastering the art of learning deeply from those who have walked the path before us, extracting timeless wisdom that can guide us through the unique challenges of our own era. 11. Give your story a heroic ending. You're sitting in your apartment in Miami at midnight, scrolling through old photos on your phone and feeling the weight of regret settling heavy in your chest. The career path you abandoned 5 years ago when fear convinced you to play it safe. The relationship you sabotaged because you weren't ready to be vulnerable. The dreams you put on hold because the timing never seemed right. The person you could have become if you'd made different choices, taken more risks, acted on your values instead of your anxieties. Looking at these fragments of your past, you feel trapped by a story that seems already written, defined by missed opportunities and roads not taken. But the ancient Stoics understood something transformative about the nature of human stories. No matter what has happened before, the ending is always still being written. Seneca faced this exact challenge in the most dramatic way imaginable. As advisor to the Roman Emperor Nero, he found himself complicit in increasingly tyrannical acts that violated everything he claimed to believe about virtue and justice. For years, he rationalized staying in power, convincing himself he could influence Nero toward more moderate policies. He accumulated vast wealth while teaching about the dangers of materialism. He remained silent about injustices while writing eloquently about moral courage. By any reasonable measure, Seneca had compromised his principles so thoroughly that his philosophical reputation should have been permanently destroyed. Yet when we remember Seneca today, we don't primarily think of him as a hypocrite or a failed philosopher. We remember him for how his story ended. When Nero finally ordered his execution on trumped-up charges of conspiracy, Seneca faced his death with extraordinary dignity and courage. He used his final hours to comfort his grieving wife, to teach his friends about accepting fate with grace, and to demonstrate that it's never too late to align your actions with your deepest values. His death became a masterclass in Stoic principles, transforming what could have been remembered as a story of moral compromise into a narrative of ultimate redemption and philosophical integrity. Seneca understood what he called the dramatic structure of human life. He wrote, "Life is like a play. It matters not how long the acting lasts, but how good it is." This theatrical metaphor reveals something crucial about how we can approach our own life stories. In great drama, characters are often defined not by their early mistakes or middle-act struggles, but by how they choose to resolve the conflicts they've created. The protagonist who learns from failure, who finds courage in the final act, and who chooses virtue over convenience when it matters most creates a narrative that redeems everything that came before. Consider how this principle transforms your relationship with your own past choices and current circumstances. That career you feel stuck in doesn't have to define your entire professional story if you begin taking steps toward work that genuinely excites you. Those relationships you've damaged through selfishness or fear don't have to represent your permanent capacity for connection if you start practicing the vulnerability and generosity required for deep bonds. The years you've spent avoiding challenges that seem too difficult don't have to prove you lack courage if you begin facing your fears with wisdom and determination. The power of focusing on your story's ending lies in understanding what Marcus Aurelius called the discipline of action. This Stoic practice involves recognizing that while you cannot change what has already happened, you maintain complete control over what happens next. Every morning presents you with a blank page where you can choose to write a different kind of chapter. Every interaction allows you to demonstrate growth, compassion, and wisdom, regardless of how you've behaved in similar situations before. Creating a heroic ending requires understanding that heroism in the Stoic sense doesn't mean grand gestures or dramatic moments of glory. It means consistently choosing to act according to your highest values, even when it's difficult, inconvenient, or scary. The parent who decides to be more patient and present with their children is writing a heroic ending to a story that might have been defined by distraction and irritability. The professional who chooses to speak up about unethical practices despite potential career consequences is transforming their narrative from one of passive compliance to active integrity. The practical application of this principle begins with what we might call ending consciousness, regularly asking yourself what kind of story you want to be telling with your life and whether your current choices align with that vision. This doesn't mean abandoning responsibility for past mistakes or pretending they didn't happen. Instead, It means understanding that acknowledging your failures honestly while committing to better choices moving forward creates a more powerful narrative than either denial or self-destructive guilt. Epictetus, who transformed his own story from slavery to becoming one of history's most influential teachers, understood that our power to create meaningful endings exists regardless of our starting circumstances. He taught that we cannot control what happens to us, but we maintain absolute authority over how we respond to what happens to us. This response capacity means that even if your story so far has been marked by setbacks, mistakes, or missed opportunities, you can still create an ending characterized by wisdom, courage, justice, and self-discipline. Building toward a heroic ending also requires developing what the Stoics called preferred indifference, perspective, understanding which aspects of your story truly matter and which are merely external circumstances. The Stoics recognized that health, wealth, social status, and even other people's opinions about us are not ultimately within our complete control and therefore shouldn't define the core meaning of our stories. What we can control and what determines whether our ending is truly heroic is our commitment to virtue regardless of external conditions. Therefore, the Stoics discovered that every person possesses the power to write a meaningful conclusion to their life story, transforming even the most troubled narratives into examples of human resilience, growth, and the triumph of character over circumstances. 12. Remember you're mortal to live fully. You're lying in bed in San Francisco at 2 a.m., unable to sleep because your mind is racing with all the things you need to do tomorrow, next week, next month. Your mental to-do list stretches endlessly into the future. The promotion you're working toward, the vacation you're planning for next year, the retirement savings you're building for decades from now, the projects you'll tackle when you have more time, the conversations you'll have when the moment feels right. Meanwhile, your life is quietly slipping away in the present moment, hour by hour, day by day, while you remain focused on some imaginary future when everything will finally fall into place. This is precisely the illusion that the ancient Stoics spent their lives dismantling through one of their most powerful and misunderstood practices. Marcus Aurelius, who could have lived with the illusion of immortality that unlimited power often creates, instead chose to begin each day by reminding himself of a fundamental truth that most people spend enormous energy avoiding. He wrote in his personal journal, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." This wasn't morbid obsession with death or pessimistic dwelling on life's fragility. Instead, it was what the Stoics called memento mori, literally meaning remember you must die. And it served as one of their most practical tools for living with clarity, purpose, and genuine appreciation for the gift of existence. Understanding why remembering mortality enhances rather than diminishes life requires grasping the psychological mechanism behind procrastination and misplaced priorities. When we unconsciously assume we have unlimited time, we naturally defer important decisions, meaningful experiences, and significant relationships. We tell ourselves we'll express love more freely when we're less busy. We'll pursue our deepest interests when we have more security. We'll have difficult but necessary conversations when we feel more prepared. This assumption of endless time creates what we might call chronic deferral syndrome, where life's most meaningful elements get perpetually postponed in favor of seemingly urgent but ultimately trivial concerns. The practice of memento mori functions as a powerful corrective to this deferral pattern by introducing what psychologists now call temporal scarcity awareness. When you genuinely internalize that your time on Earth is limited and unpredictable, your decision-making framework undergoes a profound transformation. Suddenly, spending 3 hours arguing about politics on social media seems less appealing when you remember those are 3 irreplaceable hours of your finite existence. Postponing that difficult conversation with your aging parent becomes impossible when you acknowledge that opportunities for meaningful connection are numbered and precious. Consider how this awareness transforms your approach to daily choices and long-term planning. That grudge you've been holding against a friend who hurt your feelings 2 years ago loses its grip when you realize that maintaining resentment is a choice to spend your limited emotional energy on past pain rather than present possibility. The job you hate but stay in because it feels safe becomes unbearable when you calculate how many of your remaining years you're willing to sacrifice for security that may prove illusory anyway. The creative project you've been postponing until you have perfect conditions reveals itself as something worth pursuing imperfectly now rather than perfectly never. Seneca, who faced his own mortality directly when Emperor Nero ordered his execution, understood that death awareness serves multiple functions beyond improving decision-making. He wrote, "Let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. Death keeps no calendar." This preparation involves what we might call mortality meditation, regularly contemplating not just the fact that you will die, but the uncertainty of when and how death will come. This uncertainty eliminates the comfortable assumption that you can safely postpone important actions until some mythical future moment when conditions will be ideal. The practice also generates what the Stoics recognized as authentic gratitude for present experiences. When you're fully aware that this conversation with your child, this meal with your partner, this walk through your neighborhood might be among your last, you naturally pay more attention to the richness and beauty contained in ordinary moments. This isn't about becoming anxious or fearful, but about developing what Marcus Aurelius called present moment awareness that allows you to extract maximum meaning and joy from experiences that you might otherwise take for granted. Building a healthy relationship with mortality requires understanding the difference between what the Stoics called productive and destructive death meditation. Productive contemplation of mortality increases your appreciation for life, clarifies your priorities, and motivates meaningful action. Destructive death meditation creates anxiety, paralysis, or nihilistic thinking that life doesn't matter because it ends. The key distinction lies in using mortality awareness as a tool for better living rather than as a source of existential despair. The practical application begins with regular but brief reflection on the temporary nature of your current circumstances. This might involve looking at photographs of people you've loved who are no longer alive and remembering how precious your time with them was. It might mean occasionally visiting places that remind you of life's fragility, such as hospitals or cemeteries. Not to become morbid, but to reconnect with the preciousness of health and time. It might involve keeping a small reminder on your desk or in your pocket that symbolizes the temporary nature of all things. Marcus Aurelius also practiced what he called negative visualization regarding his own death, imagining how his loved ones would remember him and what kind of legacy his daily choices were creating. This exercise reveals whether your current priorities align with what you actually want to be remembered for, often highlighting disconnects between your stated values and your actual behavior. Therefore, the Stoics discovered that regularly contemplating mortality, rather than diminishing life's joy, actually intensifies appreciation for every moment while providing the clarity and urgency necessary to live according to your deepest values before time runs out. As we reach the end of our journey through these 12 transformative choices, imagine yourself 1 year from today. You wake up in your apartment, but something feels fundamentally different. Instead of immediately reaching for your phone to scroll through social media, you take a moment to reflect on your intentions for the day. When that challenging coworker starts their usual complaints, you find yourself genuinely curious about what might be driving their frustration rather than feeling annoyed. That difficult decision you've been avoiding no longer feels overwhelming because you've learned to focus only on what's truly essential. This transformation isn't magic or wishful thinking. It's the predictable result of consistently applying wisdom that Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus developed through decades of testing these principles in real life. Each choice we've explored builds upon the others, creating what the Stoics called a virtuous cycle, where small daily decisions compound into profound changes in character, relationships, and life satisfaction. The beauty of the Stoic approach lies in its accessibility and practicality. You don't need perfect conditions, special equipment, or ideal circumstances to begin implementing these choices. Whether you start with taking daily walks to clear your mind, practicing kindness as your form of justice, or simply asking, "Is this essential?" Before committing your time and energy, each small step moves you closer to the person philosophy is trying to make you become. Remember that the ancient Stoics weren't armchair philosophers theorizing from comfortable positions. They were people facing real challenges, making difficult decisions under pressure, and learning to maintain their principles when it would have been easier to compromise. Marcus Aurelius wrote his insights while managing plague, war, and political upheaval. Seneca developed his teachings while navigating dangerous imperial politics. Their wisdom emerged from struggle, which means it can sustain you through whatever difficulties you're facing. The 12 choices we've explored create a comprehensive framework for living well in an uncertain world. When you choose action over endless preparation, build systems that work regardless of motivation, feed your mind ancient wisdom rather than modern noise, focus only on what truly matters, turn difficult people into teachers, stop caring about strangers' opinions, maintain inner peace during chaos, walk your way to mental clarity, practice daily kindness, read deeply to master your life, give your story a heroic ending, and remember your mortality to live fully, you're contributing to a tradition of human flourishing that spans centuries. Your commitment to these principles matters more than you realize. Every time you choose patience over irritation, wisdom over distraction, courage over comfort, you're demonstrating that it's possible to live differently in a chaotic world. Others notice these changes, and your example becomes an invitation for them to consider whether they, too, might benefit from ancient wisdom applied to modern challenges. If these ideas resonated with you today, I encourage you to subscribe to the Stoic Vivu channel, where we continue exploring how timeless philosophy can transform contemporary life. Like this video if it provided value, share it with someone who might benefit from these insights, and join our community of people committed to choosing wisdom over convenience and meaningful action over comfortable passivity.